You don't have to go out and run a bunch of laps around the track if you're trying to just increase your energy expenditure and lose more fat. Fat loss is much more complex than just moving more. Obviously, there's different aspects, but if we want to increase our energy expenditure, we can do so without conventional exercise. Now, exercise is important. You absolutely should be doing exercise. However, if you're sedentary or inactive, these are some things that you can still deploy that would give you an interesting benefit. And the first one is cold exposure. And I'm not talking about getting in an ice plunge or an ice bath. I'm talking about moderately exposing yourself to cold. Now, the literature suggests about 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit is where we need to be with that cold exposure. Now, this has to do with something called brown adipose tissue. Brown adipose tissue is metabolically active tissue that is technically a form of fat, but it takes calories and dissipates them as heat. There was an interesting study that was published in PLOS One. It took a look at brown adipose tissue activity in obese people versus lean people. And it found that obese people typically did not have as much brown adipose tissue activity, which suggests that they have less brown adipose tissue and they have less ability to increase their metabolic rate via this pathway. Essentially, we've seen that the energy expenditure effect from cold exposure only happens in people that have more brown adipose tissue. In order to get more brown adipose tissue, you need to occasionally be in a caloric deficit, or you can do cold exposure at like 55 to 60 degrees for 1 to 2 hours a few times per week. Literally, standing or sitting in a colder room can increase your energy expenditure and can also potentially beige some of your white fat, regular subcutaneous fat, into brown fat. And I'm not trying to make something sound magical and unrealistic. Like, that's not the goal here. The point is that it's about these little teeny things that we can check off now and then. And cold exposure is actually a decent sized check mark. It's not anything to sneeze at. It is effective, and the literature is decently strong. Number 2 is one that's exciting because it's so simple. Drinking water. Literature suggests that literally drinking a half a liter can increase your energy expenditure by 23 calories. So it burns about 23 calories on average, right? It varies from person to person. There was a study that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, took a look at 11 trials and 2 reviews, okay? And it found that in a significant fashion, the more water that was consumed, the more weight loss. Plain and simple. When you drank more water, you lost more weight. Now, additionally, there was a study that was published in the journal Obesity that took a look at subjects over the course of 12 months. It found that when they reached 1 liter of water consumption per day, they would on average burn enough to lose 2 kilograms of fat over the course of a year, just by getting to that 1 liter mark. It didn't even evaluate what would happen if they drank more. It was just looking at people that didn't drink much water compared to people that got themselves to a liter. And their resting energy expenditure increased enough to burn 2 kilograms. That's close to 6 pounds of fat over the course of a year.
After this video, I put a link down below for 40% off Sundays. Now, I have 4 dogs. I'll tell you, we feed them Sundays because it's human grade dog food. So that means it's good quality food that a human could eat themselves. You might be wondering, this is really random to have a commercial for dog food on a health channel. Bottom line is, this channel is also about my life, and I talk about things that I use, and that's how sponsors come on this channel. So that is a 40% off discount for Sundays human grade dog food. It was formulated by a veterinarian that really saw a serious need to feed higher quality food to our dogs. So that link down below gets you 40% off. If you've got pups and you care about health, it's probably an interesting fit. Check them out down below.
This next one is probably my favorite because it's so dang interesting and it's something that anyone can do. Fidgeting. But listen to the literature on this. We have to look at a relatively old study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It took a look at subjects that were laying down compared to sitting motionless, compared to sitting while fidgeting, compared to standing motionless, standing while fidgeting, walking, or walking while fidgeting. They found that when people were sitting while fidgeting, there was a 54% increase in energy expenditure above when they were laying down. Well, you're thinking, well, it's just because they were sitting up and not laying down. Well, the difference between laying down and sitting motionless was only 4%. So 54% increase if you're just Fidgeting, shaking your legs, shaking your hands, actively, consciously fidgeting. Fidgeting while standing was a 94% increase in energy expenditure. And the difference between laying down and standing was only 13%. So 94% if you're standing and moving around and fidgeting. And get this, if you're walking while fidgeting, 154% to 292% increase in energy expenditure. So if you want to look like a total maniac and walk down the street and shake your hands and have people wonder what the heck you're on, well, who cares? You're burning 300% more calories, right? I guess my point in saying this is that non-exercise activity thermogenesis accounts for so much more than you think. And it's a huge way, if you just actively chew gum, do things like this, whatever, move around, be active, it makes a difference. Then number 4 is very interesting. Protein and fiber. But this study that I want to reference takes a look at a high protein diet compared to a high fiber diet. So the high protein diet wasn't even all that high, 30% protein, 50% carbohydrate. The high fiber diet was 20% protein, 50% carbohydrate with a minimum of 35 grams of fiber. When they backed out all the data over the course of 8 weeks, they found the high protein diet led to a 4.5 kilogram weight loss. The high fiber diet led to a 3.3 kilogram weight loss. The high protein diet led to 4 kilograms of fat loss, and the high fiber diet led to 2.5 kilograms of fat loss. So both were great for fat loss, but arguably the protein was better. Going high protein over high fiber would be advantageous for fat loss, but perhaps combining the two of them would be even better. The protein has the thermic effect, where 20 to 35% of the calories you consume from protein are allocated just towards the sheer metabolism of the protein in the first place. You can solve this simply by having a protein shake in the middle of the day. A sauna or a hot bath. This is pretty interesting. There was a study published in Biomedical Research. Check this out. Okay, it had people that were overweight and inactive do 4 10-minute sauna sessions with a 5-minute break in between. So they go 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, okay? The results on their resting energy expenditure were pretty darn fascinating. They found that they lost weight, okay? But you could argue that the weight that they lost was water. But the resting energy expenditure increase that they got was not something that would be equated for with water. What we're noticing is that, hey, it's a passive way to be an exercise mimetic. The heart rate changes, the blood pressure changes, the catecholamine release, the lipolysis, the fatty acid transport, the carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1 activation, all the things that happen when you sit in a stressful high heat environment. If you wanted to take it up a notch, you could combine the third thing I talked about with a sauna. Fidget in a sauna. If a sauna is increasing your resting energy expenditure just by nature of your heart rate, now imagine if you're moving in there too. Sounds so cheesy, but what's going to happen? Move around a little bit and actually get that blood flow doing things and get that metabolism cranking. Okay, now we need to talk about a diet specifically. What diet is best for someone that is sedentary or inactive? And this is where the literature gets a little bit stronger, but also upsets some people because you're getting into diet tribe territory. There was an interesting paper published in Nutrition and Metabolism that took a look at a very low carb diet, about 10-15% total calories coming from carbs, compared to a low fat diet that was higher carbohydrate. And this is specifically in sedentary people. What's interesting is that the very low carb diet was at 1,855 calories. The low fat diet was at 1,500 and some change. So the low fat diet was actually eating less calories than the very low carb diet. But the very low carb diet lost more overall fat, weight, and specific trunk fat, abdominal fat. What the heck is going on? They ate more calories. As a matter of fact, when you look at the literature, you also see that the very low carb diet had higher resting energy expenditure. And they also had more preservation of lean body mass, probably because their protein intake was higher. This is not to bash low fat, because low fat can work. The interesting thing is for sedentary people, the absence of those carbohydrates makes a lot of sense. Carbohydrates are a fuel. If you're inactive, it does not make sense to add them in, which explains why if you're so inactive and potentially metabolically dysfunctional and insulin resistant, reducing carbohydrates makes a lot of sense. As you get healthier and more active, then the carbohydrates come in. And this can get misconstrued and people can think, oh, well, you have to earn your carbs. That's so toxic. That's not a good, no, that's not what I'm talking about here. Carbohydrates just simply are a fuel. And if you're not burning them, you don't need them. So if you're inactive, reduce them. Lastly, and this is very interesting, there was a study that was published in the Annals of Internal Medicine that put people on a calorically restricted diet, okay? Two groups, very, very similar diets, same calories, and they monitored their sleep. They had one group sleep 8.5 hours and another group sleep 5.5 hours per night. Well, what they found is that the group that slept 5.5 hours didn't lose nearly as much weight. Over the course of 14 days, the group that slept 8.5 hours lost 1.4 kilograms, whereas the group that only slept 5.5 hours, despite eating the same amount of calories, only lost 0.6 kilograms. Again, it comes down to metabolic efficiency, to glucose tolerance, to your just efficiency of movement. Are you tired so you don't have that non-exercise activity thermogenesis? You're not fidgeting as much because you're just so dog tired. Add these things together and you actually have a pretty decent playbook that could equate to lower intensity exercise. But make no mistake, you should be exercising. But maybe these are your steps you need to take to get yourself there in the first place. I'll see you tomorrow.